Let's bring on the man who does a great job with The Athletic. He's a gas station coffee enthusiast, according to his Twitter bio. And check out his Locked On Nebraska podcast when you get a chance as well. Mr. Mitch Sherman, how you doing, my friend?
Hey, Adam, I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing good. So I can't stand coffee. Okay. I brought you on to talk coffee. Did you know that? All right. We'll get to Husker football in a second.
We can do that. We can talk coffee.
What in the world can I do? My mom drinks it black, like just nothing in it, and like 8 cups a day. She has since I was a child. I don't get it. What can I do so that my taste buds aren't so revolted by coffee?
Well, you see that as I heard you saying there in the intro, that my Twitter bio touts the fact that I'm a gas station coffee enthusiast, which is basically like the cheapest brand of coffee you can probably get. Although I think that some of these gas stations around Omaha and Lincoln have upped their game when it comes to coffee, and it really is pretty good. But I mean, you can certainly tell a difference if you go into a high-end coffee shop and buy a $7 cup of coffee. I just prefer that it's still like $1.99, and that's really my enthusiasm for gas station coffee probably has more to do with the price and the ease to be able to get it than anything. Yeah. I'm not a coffee snob. I'm not a coffee connoisseur. I can't talk about grinding the beans with a real coffee person. I just needed to wake myself up in the morning because I'm against my own wishes. I kind of have grown to become like a 5:30, 6 in the morning. If not, but 6 is probably even late, like 5:30 in the morning out of bed. If I'm going to get my workout in for the day, it's got to come then, or otherwise, you know how it is. You just lose focus. So at that point, I need coffee and I need something to wake me up, and gas station is the cheapest and easiest place to get it.
Okay. So what can I do? Because you're right. So I had Jake Sorensen on the show yesterday. I mean, he gets up at 4:30 every day. They've got a newborn. I don't know when this dude sleeps. And inside 93.7 The Ticket, if you haven't been there, they've got a coffee shop. I've chatted with the individual who runs it. He's going to help me the next time I'm there and introduce me to a couple of ideas he has. But what would you advise me to do in the meantime? I mean, how?
Load it up.
Because right now I'm taking way too much pre-workout.
Yeah,
okay. Right now I'm taking way too much pre-workout, and that's awful for me, especially for someone who needs to be smart about his heart. So what can I do? I need something else. Help me out with this coffee.
Well, it sounds like you might want some decaf, first of all. Although that would defeat the purpose. That would completely defeat the purpose for me.
Yeah.
Now we're getting into dangerous territory, because I do remember that you had the heart scare. And if you're talking about pre-workout, man, I mean, I think you're getting all of the jolt that you need from a pre-workout.
Yeah.
A pre-workout drink. So it might be best, Adam, if you stay in that category of people who just are repulsed by coffee. There are times where I wish I was repulsed by it, but now I just need it. Now it's like if it's 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock and I'm getting started with my day and I don't have that cup of coffee next to me, my energy is lagging. So if you can go without it, I might advise that. If you have to do it and you're trying to get acclimated, I would just say just load it up with some flavor, because I drink it like your mom. I drink it black, and except maybe on the weekends I'll put some creamer in there. That's my little treat to myself. But if you really want to get into it, go decaf for your personal reasons, and load it up with some flavoring.
I just know I got to figure something out. But let's talk a little bit of football. We got a couple of questions here, actually. As always, folks, sending your questions, comments, thoughts, concerns, or otherwise, 402-464-5685. I'm on the Allo Fiber VIP line talking with Mitch Sherman. The first question we have is from Robert Colwell. He goes, do you think, brother, Dayton Raiola is a possibility in the future? Do you have any idea about Dayton?
Okay. I know Dayton. Yeah, I'm down with Dayton. When I visited Dylan and Dom in Arizona a year ago, last January, January of 23, I had a great conversation with Dayton. We were at a gym in North Scottsdale where those guys worked out, and man, Dayton was a sophomore in high school, and I swear he had grown like 6 inches since the last time I saw him, which was during the football season that year and back in Lincoln. And we saw him in Lincoln for the spring game with Dylan and Dom and Yvonne and their sister Taylor. Whole family was there, or has been around. Yeah, he's a player. Dayton, even more so than Dylan, has that baseball background, and he's a lefty too. So Dayton was a big-time catcher in baseball. I believe he was a catcher. I know Dylan was a catcher, but he's got a baseball physique to him. He's more. He looks more like Dominic, where he's kind of like built like a fire hydrant. Than, although he's tall, a tall fire hydrant. So I mean that in like the compliment.
We know what you mean.
Yeah, I mean he's muscular. Dayton's an athlete. I'll say that. Dylan, he fashions himself after Patrick Mahomes, and he's kind of got the body type too. So I think Dayton's going to be he's going to rise quite a bit. See, the problem he's had so far is that he's been behind Dylan, and they went from Chandler, Arizona. And then they were at Pinnacle for a semester and didn't play football there. And then he moved to Buford last year. And as a sophomore, Buford, Georgia, he was Dylan's backup. And you're not gonna get a whole lot of reps when you're behind a 5-star at your position. Although I think a lot of those games were blowouts. But anyway, he was the quarterback on the JV team and a backup on the varsity. And now he gets his shot. Like Raiola stayed in Buford, and because it's a big time school. And some intel here, but basically what my understanding is, and this comes from college coaches, is that they're happy. College coaches are happy to see him at Buford. Like, it's much better than if he had moved to Nebraska and he was playing, I'm not going to pick on a school here, but if he was playing at any school in Nebraska, like, you're going to go up against a better level of competition, at Buford, Georgia. And now we're going to know, you're going to know if this guy can hang and do it there and get it done and throw for a bunch of yards and touchdowns, then he's absolutely the Power 5 prospect that people think he might be. But up to this point, we don't know, because there's not really any sample size outside of, showing it up at some camps and throwing the ball well. He's a good looking athlete for sure. I think he's going to follow in his brother's footsteps, maybe not as a 5-star. We'll see, but this fall, but I definitely think he's going to be a Power 5 prospect. He's got a great personality too. He's more outgoing. I mean, Dylan has a great personality, but Dayton's just like more, he's like his mom. He's got his mom's personality where, everybody, whoever he meets is his friend. And I would love to see him succeed no matter where it's at. If he follows Dylan and there's Raiola's at quarterback in Lincoln for the next 6 years, then that's, I think, ideal for Nebraska.
I think Husker fans would be all right with that. I've seen a video of Dayton where he says "Go Big Red" for no real reason other than the camera's on him, and he just points to the camera, puts a 1 in the air, and says "Go Big Red." So maybe that's a sign right there.
I think he's even been more sold. I think he's even been more sold on the Nebraska lifestyle for his entire life than Dylan. And you heard Dylan, and Dylan's very much into that. And you heard him talk after the spring game about how he dreamed of coming out the tunnel. Dayton's even more invested in that, I would say.
That's awesome. My other big takeaway from what you said is that Mitch Sherman just turned heel on all of Nebraska high school football. He just turned heel, if anybody knows what that means, pro wrestling term. All right. We got a couple more comments real quick from Robert Caldwell. He sends the high fives and fist bumps. Thank you. He says, keep up the good work on all your shows. Really enjoy your take on all things. Appreciate that. Now, let's talk about Dylan. Let's say he's the starter going into next fall. I think most people believe that's going to be the case. Nobody's been named just yet. But let's say he is. Seems to be a logical assumption to make at this point. And the expectations, and I talked about those before we brought you on, for Dylan are incredibly high, and for obvious reasons. And then what he did at the spring game, matched or surpassed anybody's expectations for what he could have done in his first spring game. But what do we need from our starting quarterback next year? I don't know that we need all of that. What do we need from our starting quarterback next year, Mitch?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. And that's how Matt Rule and Marcus Satterfield and Glenn Thomas are looking at it. Like, you don't need him to be the 5-star. He doesn't need to live up to that as a true freshman. Now, when he gets further in his career, yeah, I mean, the expectation would be that if it goes according to plan, like, there's a time where he's a Heisman candidate. There's a time where he's a first-round draft pick prospect. But that's not what Nebraska needs from him in 2024. It needs a steady presence, someone who's going to make smart decisions. And you saw some of that in the spring game. I thought some of the plays that Nebraska was most pleased with, and I was most impressed with because it was his first time ever playing on that field, are when he threw the ball away. when he made the decision not to try to force something that wasn't there. Threw it out of the back of the end zone or put it in a place where only his receiver had a chance to catch it. Those to me were more impressive even than like the touchdown throws that he made. So they need that. They need that from him as a true freshman. They need him to involve the players around him. He doesn't have to be the entire focus of the offense. I mean, the quarterback is always going to be the focal point, but there are enough weapons as long as Nebraska stays healthy and doesn't have a disastrous offseason and preseason when it comes to its receivers and tight ends being able to get on the field. Like, he's got to be able to rely on those guys and get the ball to them. And you saw some stuff in the RPO game, I thought, on just a couple of plays. They didn't put a ton of that out there, but they showed just enough to make their opponents early in the season have to respect it. And if you watch that film and you see him throw that little RPO pass to the tight end in the flat, that was something new that Nebraska didn't do last year. But that really makes you salivate, I think, if you're a Nebraska fan, to know that they've got that in their arsenal. It's an easy throw for him, and he can make it, and I think he will make it. And they just need him to do that kind of stuff, like the long pass plays, the throws to Jalen Lloyd over the top, the stuff to Isaiah Nair over the top. Yeah, it's going to be there. It's going to come. It's going to be a part of what they want to do. But I don't think that's like the number one priority for Dylan. It's avoiding turnovers, being a smart player, and just managing the offense as a true freshman.
You make a great point with the RPO game to Thomas Fidone and other tight ends and maybe big-bodied wide receivers over the middle. What type of a season? Because Thomas Fidone, highly recruited, okay, as we know, had a couple of injuries, came back, played well last year. What can we expect out of him this year? Because this is a guy, as much as anybody, obviously any pass catcher, but could benefit from a quarterback who takes care of the ball, maybe is a little bit more accurate and consistent with his passes. What do you think we can expect out of Fidone potentially this year?
A big season. I mean, this is the first time that he's gone through an off season and been healthy. Last year, he was still coming off that second knee injury, and everybody was just kind of biting their fingernails to hope that he could finally survive a spring where he wasn't hurt. And even as the year approached, it was like, okay, well, it looks good, but he hasn't done it yet in a season. Going into last year, the only experience he had on the field in season in college were a couple of reps against Wisconsin the year before, where honestly, it was just like an introduction to college football. He got knocked on his butt, and it was like, welcome to the Big Ten West moment. And then last year, he started to come into his own, and now he has all of that under his belt. So it's like a night and day difference as far as his confidence and his experience. And he's had a year to be in the weight room. And, Thomas said he was up around 260, or maybe Matt Rule said that Thomas was up around 260. And I thought when we talked to him this spring, you could tell he looked bigger, like in the upper body and his shoulders. Like, I thought after the spring game, maybe he had ice on his shoulders, and that was just him, in a t-shirt. He's that much bigger. Like, so that's a scary thought, because if you're a defense that's facing Nebraska this year, because, you saw what he did in high school and just like the freaky athleticism. I'll never forget going to watch him before he committed to Nebraska, when he was, I think he was the number 1 or number 2 tight end in the country, depending on which recruiting ranking you were looking at. And I went out to Lewis Central, and I was getting out of my car. I just parked alongside the practice field, and I'm walking up, and I'm like kind of scanning the field. Okay, where's Fidone? And I see this big body running over the middle on a play and jumping up in the air. Like, he was so far away, I couldn't even like look at his face or see the number on his jersey, but he goes like 11 and a half, 12 feet up in the air to get his fingertips on a ball and comes down with it. Any other player that you might have found in like the Omaha metro area that year, it's an overthrow. And it's just a practice play, but I'm like, okay, well, there he is. I mean, I found him as I was walking up to the field. That's the kind of stuff that he can do. And I think this is the year where you can start to really see some of that at Nebraska. But I mean, the ceiling, I don't know. I mean, he caught 25 passes last year, and I know he wasn't like thrilled with that production. I don't know how much it'll be higher, I think, if he stays healthy, but I don't know. I mean, it's not like he's going to catch 70 passes. I mean, because they've got good receivers, and they have other tight ends. Like, I mean, you put Carter Nelson into this offense, he's one guy. He might be the only guy, but he's one guy who's every bit as athletic as Fidone. And, he may come in and they may be able to share some receptions. And you got Ismail Smith-Flores, who I think is going to come into his own this year as a tight end in this offense. Nate Borkercher, different kind of athlete than Fidone and Carter Nelson, but He's going to get some catches and got a big one in the spring game from Heinrich Harburg. So they're pretty stacked at tight end as far as having guys who can catch the ball. So it's going to have to be spread around. But Thomas is a special athlete for sure.
Now, I believe I'm correct in this. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it Brock Bowers and Fidone that were 1 and 2 in the country that year as far as being highly rated tight ends? Is that correct?
Yeah, the Georgia just recent draft pick, who was, you could say maybe the best college football player in the country last year and even the year before. I believe they were in that same class, that 2021 class. So that was the COVID year where those guys, Fidone came in the same time as Teddy Prohaska and Heinrich Harburg, and they really didn't get to spend time on campus while they were recruited because you couldn't be on campus. I do believe, yes, that was the same year Bowers came out.
Yeah, I'm with you. Bowers was just taken 13th overall by the Raiders in the NFL draft. I can't believe he wasn't top 10. I've said all year the two best football players in American college football are Marvin Harrison Jr. and Brock Bowers. Okay. But last question I got for you. Defensive side of the ball. We don't have official details on Bly Hill or Demetrius Bell and their injuries during the spring game. At least I haven't heard any. Okay, if you have, let us know. But my question is, if Bly Hill isn't able to play right away out the gate to start the season, who do you think can step up in that cornerback role?
Well, they're definitely going to have to get somebody ready and then hope for the best. And I think that the Demetrius Bell on the offensive side, I think it's very pesky. I don't think that he'll be back in time to play next season. I don't know. Maybe it's an end of the season kind of thing, like what Nebraska did with Marquise Buford this last year, the safety who came back and played in 4 games and still redshirted. Although Demetrius is already redshirted, so there's not a lot of sense in limiting him. If he can play, he'll play. I don't think it looks great for him right now. Bly Hill, I think there's real hope that they can have him. Now, does that mean that he's ready to go on August 31st against UTEP? It's probably too early to say. But even if you can get him for like the Big Ten season to be at 100%, then that's a win. If so, they got to have people ready in the meantime. And I mean, I look first to Jeremiah Charles. People remember Jeremiah Charles from the dunk contest at PBA. Yep. Just a ridiculous athlete. Kind of in the Jalen Lloyd mold. He's the Jalen Lloyd of Nebraska defense, and those two are really close. And I wrote a story about the two of them going through track season this year. They're both 50-foot triple jumpers, 24, 25-foot long jumpers. Jeremiah is a crazy athlete. So he's got the skills to be able to play the cornerback position. It's just being refined and understanding all of his responsibilities and playing within himself. Mario Buford, Marquise's younger brother, who's a true freshman and was an early enrollee this spring. He's a highly regarded prospect and is somebody who could compete for time if Bly Hill's not ready to go at the start of the season. They may look at Malcolm Hartzog. I know they want to play him at safety this year, and they hope they can play him at safety. They feel like that's his better position, more natural position, and he shifted back and forth between corner and safety last year. But if they're in a situation of need because of an injury or there's another injury, you may see Malcolm Hartzog, who thrived as a corner in his true freshman season 2 years ago. You may see him switch back and play more of that position. But I do think they want to find a home for him where he's not going back and forth in the middle of the season between corner and safety. And ideally that's at safety. So maybe it comes down to Jeremiah Charles and Mario Buford.
All right, Mitch, I appreciate you taking the time. Thank you for joining me. Appreciate the coffee tips as well.